Welcome to this episode of the First Aid Show. In this episode, we're going to look at a personal experience I've just had. Now, I had to have, went to the doctor and said I had to have a gastroscopy. A gastroscopy is where they're going to put a camera into your stomach. Now, I was a little bit nervous about this, so I thought, what can we find out a bit more information about it? And when I looked on the web, it was all very technical. There was not really anyone saying, is this what it's actually going to be like for real? So we thought with this episode, we'll just cover what this procedure actually involves. Now, it started off with being referred by my doctor, who then sent me to a specialist and said, yes, I've got to have this test. And they gave me a letter and they gave me an information booklet. Now, most hospitals do this. In that hospital, it showed the information, what to do, what to expect. So before I even went along, I had all the key information I needed about the procedure. But I didn't really know how it would affect me. And that's really what we want to cover. Have a look at how it actually affects you and whether you think it's bad. And this is just my personal opinion on this and with my experience, but hopefully this will be helpful. When I actually arrived at the hospital, it was an afternoon appointment. In the books they say allow enough time, and you must allow enough time. In my case, they had to overrun in the morning, which meant when I got there at 1:30, they were still just finishing off the morning treatments. So do allow enough time. When you arrive, you sit in the waiting room and then they'll call you forward. Once you then sit in a separate waiting room and you're called forward for the paperwork side and registration. Now what this will involve to start with is they'll check who you are. They'll put a little ID bracelet around your wrist, and on that bracelet will have your name, your date of birth, reference numbers, and maybe even a scan code. Leave this bracelet on. It's just so they can identify you, and at every stage during it, they always check the bracelet to make sure that it's you they're dealing with. And also if you're unconscious, if you've had a sedation, they know who you are. Other things they'll ask you to go through is medical history. You have to take along any details of any medication you're on. Don't just assume that the hospital are going to know instantly what prescriptions you're on. So all I did is I just photocopied the repeat prescription form that was given by my doctor. They'll go through things. They'll also ask you maybe a question of, do you want a throat spray or sedation? Now for me, I thought I had the choice. I could have throat spray. The idea here is they spray this antiseptic into your throat that's supposed to take the gag reflex away. And then they can insert the camera into your throat and you're fully conscious. There's no sedation involved at all. Now for me personally, I didn't really want to go down that route. It was about 50-50 in the group of about 6 or 7 people in the waiting room of who was having and who wasn't. I chose sedation. Now, to start with, I thought sedation meant I was out cold, but no, they're saying it's sedation. You are still aware of what's actually going on. Now, this was explained to me. When I heard that, I was a bit concerned. I thought, well, maybe it's just best with the throat spray. But no, we went through it all. They explained very clearly what's involved, and they went through, and then you have to sign a piece of paper. Next thing they'll go through is they'll check your blood pressure and your pulse, and they'll record that. Now, probably your blood pressure is going to be a little bit higher. I know mine was a little bit higher because you're a little bit more apprehensive because you're not really sure what's going to happen. And that was probably the biggest fear of it, fear of the unknown. So once they've done that, they go through the consent forms. They talk about possible risks, things that will happen. And although they explained some possible things could go wrong, the actual chance of them happening in the standard procedure was next to nothing. So it's not anything you really need to worry about. Hospital did make it very, very clear exactly what was going to happen and how it would affect me, and they're more than happy to answer any questions. They know you're nervous. After that, waited for a little bit longer and then moved through and given a bed. Now, in the hospital I went to, all you had to do then is just to put a gown over the top half, and then you sat there and wait. And the nurse then came across, because I'd opted for the sedation, just put a needle in. With them, they put the needle into my arm. Sometimes you have it into the back of your hand, depending on which of the veins is best. Once that's in, they secure that off, and then when your time comes, I just walked into the room, walk in there, the doctor has a quick chat with you, and he was very good. He reassured me on what was going to happen, what procedure was, and what was going to be expected of me. Then they got me to lay down onto my left side, positioned me right, and a doctor again explained what was actually going to happen. And at this stage, you are going to be a little bit nervous, but looking from hindsight, don't be. It's very straightforward. They're very careful. You have a nurse that stays with you the whole time. They then put a little tube into your nose. It's just a small tube with foam on the end. It's inserted in the nose, just oxygen, just to help you with your oxygen levels. So they pop that in, you know that's in. It's a little bit of an odd smell about it when it first goes in, but that soon passes. Then they'll explain that they're now going to inject the sedation. And once they put in there, I was expecting to, maybe feel really dizzy, but it didn't. You just sort of felt a little bit distant. And then, although you know what's going on, and you know it's maybe the word's uncomfortable, probably the best word, but not painful, there's not anything there. And all I remember is that going in and then talking. And I think at some point during here I was then asleep because next thing I know it's all over. I mean, I didn't remember the tube coming out or anything like that. I was then conscious going back into the ward, and then they laid down for about 10-15 minutes, sat me up. Although I felt a little bit lightheaded, felt absolutely fine. From then, sit you down, give you some toast or something to drink, a cup of tea, and then you can go home. Now, as far as distress, if I'd have known it was quite that straightforward at the start, I think I would have probably been a little bit less nervous before I went through. So the idea with this film is just to give you a little bit of an insight. I think this goes for a lot of medical procedures that you're likely to go through. If you've got that little bit more information, if you can talk to people beforehand, then it makes it a lot better. Now, me being me, I did talk to a lot of people beforehand, and unfortunately, I think I heard some wrong stories from time to time, which made it more serious. Definitely the choice between the throat spray and the sedation was made before I went along there. I wanted to make it as simple as possible. But overall, a procedure like this can be more complicated than what I had. Generally speaking, the people that were there, they all said the same. It was very, very straightforward. But some of them had to have a small biopsy taken, which may then cause a little bit more blood maybe, and then start coughing a little bit of blood. But this will depend on what actually happens. The actual procedure time is only around about 5 or 10 minutes. It's not a long procedure, it's quite straightforward. So what we really looked at here is the gastroscopy, and there's lots of other versions of this type of test that can have. And we'll maybe look at some of those later on another episode. But generally speaking, if you do have to have this procedure, definitely, if you've got any worries, talk to your doctor, or maybe talk to the day unit wherever you're having this procedure done. They'll easily be able to help you. They'll be able to go through things. And probably a little bit of advice for this is discuss it with people, but be really careful what you read, what horror stories. Going on some of these medical blogs, they can really scare you, and it's really, really unnecessary. Taking that on afterwards, how did I feel? Well, this was yesterday, and it's now today. Absolutely fine days filming, no problem at all. They warned me I'd have sore throats, no problem with that at all. However, went to bed at 8 o'clock last night. I was pretty sleepy, but no problem otherwise. So if you do have to have this done, hopefully this has been a little bit of help to maybe take some of the fears away from the procedure itself, but have it, try and relax the best you can, and to be honest, it'll be over and done with as soon as next thing you know, it'll be finished.